The painting you're about to see is one of the most terrifying depictions of death in the history of art, but not in the way you might expect. The artist did not need to paint skeletons, demons, or the moment a soul leaves the body to horrify the viewer. The horror of this painting isn't in what you see right away, but in what it makes you slowly realize, from the pale bodies slipping into the water to the father at the bottom left cradling the corpse of his own son. And of course, the tiny speck of a ship on the horizon that half the men on the raft have not yet realized is sailing away from them. This canvas is called the Raft of the Medusa, and for 2 centuries people have whispered that the French government tried to erase it, that it was banned, hidden, buried. The truth is stranger than that rumor, and honestly, more damning. This painting wasn't quietly locked away in some vault. It was allowed to hang in public, in the middle of Paris, in front of the very people it was accusing. And that decision to let it be seen might be the most revealing part of this whole story. Let's back up. The man who painted it was Théodore Géricault, a 27-year-old artist who before this was mostly known for smaller, gentler work. Studies of horses, quiet portraits, technical sketches. Nothing in his career suggested he was about to produce the most politically explosive painting France had seen in a generation. He would be dead within 5 years of finishing it, at just 32 years old. But in the time he had left, he built something that still stops people in their tracks in the Louvre today, hanging in the same wing as the Mona Lisa, dwarfing it in size and arguably in sheer emotional weight. To understand why this painting terrified the French establishment, you have to go back 2 years earlier, to a disaster the government desperately wanted the public to forget. In the summer of 1816, a French naval ship called the Méduse set sail for the colony of Senegal, carrying roughly 400 people. Her captain was a man named Hugues Duroy de Chaumeries, 53 years old, a nobleman, and someone who hadn't actually commanded a ship in a quarter of a century. He didn't get the job because he was skilled. He got it because he had the right friends in the newly restored French monarchy. 2 weeks into the voyage, his inexperience caught up with him, and he ran the ship straight onto a sandbank off the coast of what's now Mauritania. There weren't enough lifeboats, not even close. Out of 400 people, only 250 could fit safely into boats. The rest, 147 men and women, were crammed onto a raft hastily lashed together from the ship's own timber, a platform roughly the size of a tennis court, so overloaded that the people at its edges stood waist-deep in seawater just to stay on it. The plan was simple enough on paper. The lifeboats would tow the raft to shore. In practice, the officers in those lifeboats decided the raft was dead weight, slowing them down, so they cut it loose and rowed away. What happened next is the part the government spent years trying to keep out of print. The first night alone claimed 20 lives, washed overboard or crushed in the chaos. The second night was worse. A mutiny broke out in total darkness, and roughly 60 more people were killed with knives, sabers, even an axe. Within days, survival had turned into something almost unspeakable, the living eating the dead, and eventually the strong deciding which of the weak wouldn't make it to morning. For 13 days this went on, adrift, starving, killing. When a French ship called the Argus finally spotted the raft, it wasn't even looking for it. Pure chance. The crew initially sailed right past before the wind shifted and brought them back. 15 people were pulled from the wreckage alive, 5 more died shortly after being rescued. Of the original 147 people placed on that raft, only 10 ever saw home again. 2 of those 10 survivors, a surgeon and an engineer, wrote down everything that happened and published it. The French government tried to smother the story, worried about what it revealed about cronyism, incompetence, and who gets sacrificed when the people in charge fail. But the book became a sensation across Europe anyway. And somewhere in Paris, a young painter read every page of it and then went looking for the men who had lived it. That's where Géricault's obsession begins, and it's genuinely unsettling how far he took it. He wasn't content to imagine the scene. He tracked down survivors and interviewed them directly. He hired the ship's own carpenter, one of the 10 who made it home, to build him an exact-scale replica of the raft. Then he did something most artists never would. He went to a hospital and a morgue and asked for actual human remains, severed limbs, heads, and brought them back to his studio, letting them decompose for months so he could study, in real time, exactly how dying and dead flesh looks under changing light. He reportedly shaved his own head so he wouldn't be tempted to leave his workspace and rejoin normal life. For well over a year, he essentially lived inside this tragedy. And when you finally look at the finished painting, the first thing your eye catches isn't actually the bodies. It's a small, easy-to-miss object near the front of the raft, half covered by a fold of fabric, an axe. Géricault never shows you the mutiny itself. He just leaves that single object there and lets your imagination fill in exactly what it means. Once you notice it, everything else on the canvas shifts. The men straining toward the horizon, arms raised, don't look quite so hopeful anymore. They look like people who don't yet understand the full horror of what surrounds them, except one figure does understand. In the bottom left corner sits an old man, motionless, not reaching toward anything, not looking at the horizon at all. He's holding a young man across his lap, his son already dead. Every other person on that raft is straining toward rescue. He isn't, he's past that. He already knows how this ends. So, did France ban this painting? Not literally. And that's actually the more disturbing detail. It went on public display at the Paris Salon of 1819 under a deliberately vague title, Scene of Shipwreck, as if renaming it might soften what everyone in the room already recognized. Royalist critics tore into it, calling it grotesque, ugly, a thinly veiled attack on the crown. The government had a very personal reason to hate it. The incompetent captain who caused all this death had been appointed by the very regime that was now judging the painting. Géricault, disheartened by the hostile reception at home, eventually took the work across the English Channel, where audiences received it as a masterpiece. It wasn't until after his early death in 1824 that the Louvre finally purchased it from his family, cementing its place among the most important paintings France has ever produced, the same institution that once let its critics try to bury it in scorn. So no, there was no formal decree, no official ban. What actually happened might be worse, an attempt to shame a painting into irrelevance simply because it dared to hold a mirror up to the people running the country. I'd love to hear your take in the comments. The figure at the top of that human pyramid, waving a scrap of cloth at a ship that can't see him. Do you read that as hope, or as something far crueler? Thanks for watching all the way through, and I'll see you in the next video.